Right now, there's a woman in your life you've already written off, and you're wrong about her. You know the feeling. She was engaged, present, maybe even showing signs that went beyond friendship. Then something shifted. The texts got shorter. The responses took longer. The energy that was there seemed to disappear, and you made a decision. She's not interested. You backed away. Maybe you still think about it sometimes, but you've moved on, told yourself it wasn't meant to be. Here's what you don't know. That exact shift, the one you interpreted as rejection, might have been something completely different. It might have been the opposite of what you thought it was. Most men misread this specific moment because they don't understand what's actually happening beneath the surface. They see withdrawal and interpret it as disinterest. They see distance and call it indifference. But there's a silent language happening in that space, and almost nobody teaches men how to read it. By the end of this video, you're going to understand the difference between a woman who is genuinely not interested and a woman who is testing whether you're worth trusting with what she actually feels. You'll be able to recognize it in real time. And more importantly, you'll know what to do about it, which is the part that matters most. You've seen it before. The replies get shorter. The enthusiasm seems to fade. Most men call this the end. It's often the beginning. When a woman reduces her visible engagement, most people assume she's losing interest. That's the obvious interpretation. But the psychology underneath is more subtle. Women face a particular challenge that men often don't think about. How do you test whether someone is secure enough to handle your actual feelings without risking too much of yourself first? Think about it from her perspective for a moment. She's felt something, maybe for a little while now, but she doesn't know if you're someone who can handle her genuine interest without becoming needy, without demanding reassurance, without crumbling if she's busy or distracted. So she does something that looks like withdrawal, but is actually low-risk observation. She pulls back just enough to see how you respond. This is a protective mechanism, not a rejection. A woman who is genuinely uninterested doesn't usually reduce engagement and watch. She just disappears. There's no pattern to it. There's no sense of testing. She simply stops investing energy because there's nothing to invest in anymore. But when a woman pulls back slowly, deliberately, with those shorter replies and longer response times, she's watching to see if you chase, if you panic, if you try to convince her you're worth her time. That kind of withdrawal is rarely the ending. It's usually a question she's asking, and the way you answer determines what happens next. But to understand why she pulls back, you have to understand what she's actually testing for. She isn't deciding if she likes you. She's deciding if she can trust what she already feels. This is the critical reframe that most relationship advice never addresses. When a woman has real interest, the question isn't whether she finds you attractive or valuable. The question becomes, is it safe to show you that? Can you handle it without spiraling into neediness? Will you stay steady, or will you become someone different the moment you sense she's invested? What researchers have observed about attachment and behavioral signaling is that people who feel secure don't need constant validation. They can sit in ambiguity without panicking. They can wait for a reply without spiraling into worst-case scenarios. A woman is testing for that steadiness because steadiness is what allows her to trust her own feelings. Here's what happens psychologically. When a woman senses potential in someone, her nervous system becomes activated in a way that feels vulnerable. That activation, that attraction, that emotional openness needs to feel safe. If she sends you a vulnerable signal and you respond with panic, with over-pursuit, with desperate reassurance seeking, her nervous system registers that as a threat to her own emotional safety. She will withdraw completely, not as a test anymore, but as a genuine protective response. But if she sends that signal and you stay calm, if you respond without neediness, if you remain the same person she was attracted to in the first place, something else happens. That steadiness becomes its own signal. It tells her that you are someone who can hold space for her feelings without collapsing under the weight of them. One instance means little, Pattern means everything. She's not judging you on a single short reply or a single delay. She's watching the overall response across multiple small moments. That's what makes this a test and not a game. Of course, most men do fail it, not because they're weak, but because of one instinct nobody warned them about. Here's the part that stings a little. It's usually not her losing interest. It's you proving her doubt right. When a man senses withdrawal, something primal activates. It feels like loss. The brain interprets ambiguity as threat, and threat triggers the fight or flight response. Most men default to fight. They chase, they text more, they try to convince, they seek reassurance. Some men default to flight. They disappear, they create distance first, they try to take control of the rejection by rejecting her before she rejects them. Neither of these responses is wrong in a moral sense. They're just deeply, consistently ineffective when what's actually happening is a test of your steadiness. When you chase during her withdrawal, here's what she experiences: confirmation that her doubt was justified. She was right to worry that you might become anxious, might panic, might need too much from her. You've just shown her exactly what she was afraid of. The withdrawal that was a question, are you secure enough, becomes an actual ending because you answered with a no. When you disappear or get cold first, you're answering a different question with the same result. You're saying, you were right to doubt me. I cannot handle uncertainty without resorting to control. Both roads lead to the same place. She stops testing because the answer is already clear. Chasing reads as anxious. Disappearing reads as defensive. Steadiness reads as secure. Women don't feel attracted to anxiety or defensiveness. They feel attracted to security, to someone who can sit in uncertainty without needing to resolve it immediately. The reason this matters is not complicated, but it's counterintuitive for most men. Attraction isn't about intensity of response. It's about consistency of presence. She doesn't need you to respond faster or with more enthusiasm. She needs you to respond the same way you did when everything felt stable and easy. That's what tells her nervous system that it's safe to trust what she feels. Once you see what she's actually watching for, the right response becomes obvious. Picture this. She sends a short, cool reply. You have two options. Only one of them makes her curious again. Option one is what most men do. They notice the shortness, interpret it as coldness, and immediately try to fix it. They send a longer message. They ask if everything is okay. They add more warmth, more energy, trying to pull back the engagement they felt slipping. This reads to her as panic. It reads as you becoming a different person the moment she withdrew. It confirms the test result. You cannot be steady when the ground feels uncertain. Option two is what actually works. You read the short reply, you notice the shift, and you respond the same way you would have responded if the conversation was flowing naturally. Not cold in return, that's just playing games and she'll recognize it. But normal, steady, exactly as present and engaged as you were before, because her withdrawal hasn't actually changed who you are. Let's be specific about what this looks like in real behavior. If she sends a one-word reply to something that would normally get a longer response, you don't suddenly become very formal. You don't add extra words to compensate. You respond to what she actually said naturally without inflating it with extra effort. If she takes longer to reply, you don't check your phone constantly. You don't send follow-up messages. You go about your day the same way you would have anyway. This is harder than it sounds because everything in your nervous system is screaming that you need to do something, that you need to fix this, that if you don't respond with more energy, the whole thing will collapse. But that's the exact fear she's testing. Can you sit with that fear without acting on it? That's the answer she's looking for. Of course, context matters here. We're not talking about a woman who has actually gone silent for weeks with no engagement at all. We're talking about the specific pattern of withdrawal that has rhythm to it, the pullback that is clearly a test, not an actual disappearance. There's a difference between she went quiet for a few days as part of a pattern and she disappeared entirely. One is a test. The other might actually be disinterest. The pattern is what separates the two. But most men get this wrong. They either chase every moment of slight withdrawal or they wait until the withdrawal becomes absolute and then they walk away. The sweet spot is neither of these. It's staying steady through the test, which sounds simple until you realize how much internal regulation that actually requires. But there's a deeper layer most men never reach because it requires noticing something almost invisible. There's one signal so quiet most men never register it consciously, but it's the most honest one she gives. After all of this, after the withdrawal, after the test, after you've responded with steadiness, there's a signal that appears. It's not dramatic. It won't feel like a breakthrough moment. It's so subtle that you could miss it completely, and most men do. What researchers who study attachment and nonverbal behavior call return behavior is the tendency for someone to unconsciously make small movements back towards someone they're emotionally engaged with. It's not a return to full engagement. It's fragments. It's small, seemingly random movements in your direction. In the context we're talking about, it looks like this. After days of short replies and distance, she suddenly likes something you posted. Not commented, liked. Just a small acknowledgement that she's still paying attention. Then maybe a few days later, she watches your story. That small circular profile image that shows she was there, even if she didn't respond. Or she reaches out with something small and unrelated to the conversation that stalled. Not a resolution, just proof that you're still in her awareness. Here's the psychological truth beneath this behavior. When a woman is testing and you pass the test by staying steady, her nervous system gets important information. You're safe. The withdrawal wasn't about losing you. It was about confirming that you could be trusted. And once that confirmation happens, the protective distance isn't necessary anymore. She starts to unconsciously move back towards you in small ways. These returns are honest because they're not strategic. She's not thinking, I should like his post to show I'm interested. It's unconscious. It's her nervous system's way of saying, okay, I believe you now. I can trust this. The likes, the story views, the small random texts, these are her returning to the space she pulled away from because now it feels safe. One like on one post means nothing. A woman who is genuinely uninterested might like your post once and never again. But a pattern of return, small actions, spaced out, inconsistent but present, that's a signal that the test is over and you passed. She's coming back. The protective distance is dissolving because you demonstrated the steadiness she was looking for. The reason most men miss this is that they're usually looking for something bigger. They're expecting her to suddenly be engaged again, to text more, to show dramatic enthusiasm. They miss the small signs because the small signs don't feel like real proof. But for a woman who was testing whether she could trust her own attraction, small signs are exactly what she gives when that trust starts to form. She's not going to suddenly transform back into the engaged version of herself because that would be too vulnerable too fast. She comes back slowly in fragments, testing whether the steadiness continues. And here's something most men never consider. Once you know what to look for, you might realize you've already seen this in a past situation. With a woman you thought had lost interest, she probably gave you these small signals and you probably didn't recognize them. You were too busy interpreting her silence as rejection, or you had already walked away. Once you know what to look for, you'll realize you've probably already seen it. You just didn't know what it meant. So here's what this actually means for the woman you've been overthinking. The shift you noticed, the withdrawal, the shorter replies, the distance, it probably wasn't her losing interest. It was her testing whether she could trust it. And if you chased during that test, you answered the question she was asking with a no. The attraction didn't disappear because she never wanted you. It disappeared because you showed her exactly what she was afraid of. But here's what matters most. Now you understand the pattern. You can see it for what it is, not what it looks like. A woman who is genuinely uninterested doesn't pull back slowly and watch your reaction. She doesn't send short replies that feel calculated. She just fades. The engagement drops and stays dropped. There's no test because there's nothing to protect. She's simply moving on. A woman who is testing looks different. The withdrawal has rhythm. The distance is deliberate. And if you've been steady, if you haven't panicked, haven't chased, haven't disappeared in response, you'll start to see the small returns, the likes that appear days later, the story views, the random text that resurfaces the conversation when you'd both gone quiet. The difference is real, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. You become someone who reads these patterns instead of someone who reacts to them. And that shift in perception changes everything about how you respond in these moments. When the pull to chase hits you, you'll remember this instead. That overwhelming urge to fix things, to pursue, to convince, that's not what keeps someone. Steadiness does, consistency does. The ability to remain yourself even when everything feels uncertain, that's what a woman's nervous system registers as safety. And safety is the foundation everything else is built on. And this brings us to the one thing you should do the next time you feel that pull to chase. When a woman pulls back and you feel the panic rising, here's what you do. You notice it. You observe it happening inside yourself without acting on it. And then you respond exactly the way you would have responded if the withdrawal wasn't happening. Not cold, not distant, just steady, just present, just the same version of yourself she was attracted to before the test began. That's it. That's the whole thing. Everything we've talked about, the withdrawal, the test, the return behavior, it all hinges on one principle. Steadiness is the message. Consistency is the answer. Your reaction to her uncertainty tells her whether she can trust her own feelings. Think back to the last time you assumed she'd lost interest. Comment the moment, and I'll tell you what I think was really happening. Next time, we look at the exact 10-minute window in early conversation that quietly decides whether she invests and why almost every man wastes it without realizing.